If you prick us, do we not bleed?
Don't tempt these people, Mr. McCoy. Please get to the point.
Certainly.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now somewhere in upstate New York, she's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. It is a day of feast, and I cannot imagine a better feast than to sit down at this table, talk about X-Men, the animated series.
Very serious episode.
It is a very serious episode.
X-Men, the animated series. The pie's been taken out of the oven. There's been many dishes and cooking and festivities so far. So if folks are listening to this over their holiday weekend, we're grateful for you. Thanks for being a part of our X-Men animated and beyond family. Thanks for being a part of the Arkham Sessions family. Happy holidays. If you do not celebrate this holiday but are enjoying your weekend and joining us, we're really grateful to be with you.
Let me give you another little piece of coincidence similar to last time when I told you my first issue of X-Men was 213. Our first episode was 213. This episode originally premiered November 27th, 1992. Most of our listeners, unless they're patrons, most of our listeners will be listening to this probably in their cars on their way to work, lamenting the fact that they have to go to do some grueling job after a long holiday weekend on November 27th, 2023. So 31 days. 31 year, 30, 29, 30 math.
31.
30. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 31 years to the day that this episode premiered. So, I don't know. Let's see what other kinds of coincidences we can hit between now and the end of this.
31 years later, the story holds up.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this because, of course, we've done so many Batman animated episodes on the show. This is what we started out doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing already that X-Men is more serialized. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's something I was going to bring up.
The arc just continues to go. The first two episodes felt like a little mini movie, but it continues on. It starts in the middle of the ongoing conflict, of course, between humans and mutants. Jubilee has just been taken in by Professor Xavier and is still understanding what it's like to be integrated into kind of the X-Men family.
I don't know. It seems like she's pretty integrated. I mean, she leans over and kisses Xavier on the cheek at one point.
She's very sweet to him.
Yeah.
There's one point where he's basically in distress the entire time we've seen him. There's always something going on, and his soldiers, his family, like his people, they're all being attacked and imprisoned, and so he's probably under so much stress.
You're going to learn very early on, really, that Xavier is not a character who is ever really not stressed. He's got a lot on his shoulders. I can't think of too many occasions, even in the comics growing up, where Xavier was just purely happy.
That's upsetting.
And when he was, it usually meant something crazy was about to happen. So,
well, I mean, yes. And we're talking about the burdens. Last episode, we talked about the burdens of Cyclops and Wolverine, their unique experiences with their own histories, but also their phenotype, their mutant abilities, which are also their hardships. Like it kind of works both ways. Your superpower also kind of doubles as your weakness, your fallibility, your the thing that creates distress or sorrow for you, and sometimes holds you back.
Yeah.
And we talked about Cyclops feeling this incredible burden, and I imagine that Professor X also experiences this this unbearable burdensomeness around taking care of his community, having to be incredibly vigilant, protective, knowing that they're targeted so much. And then this episode introduces his nemesis, Magneto, and you just see all of the accumulation of the challenges that he experiences. But it is very endearing when Jubilee just comes over to his wheelchair, his souped up ex
Without
wheelchair.
wheels. Yes.
I'm
His
sure
hover chair.
there's a word for it that I'm sure folks are going to tell us about in the comments, but she kisses him on the cheek, and it's just very endearing. And it also reminds us she hasn't seen everything. She hasn't seen what he's seen.
Yeah.
He's been through decades of war.
Yeah.
And there's this innocence and hopefulness about her, but it's a really nice dynamic because she's reminding him, hey, what are we doing this all for? It's for us to be happy, to be together, to be grateful. And I think there's just that kind of intimacy that he appreciates from her. But as I mentioned, the ongoing arc, the serialized nature of the show is really apparent to me now. Whereas with the animated series, Batman, the animated series, I think there is a big story. There's a big story there.
There are moments when characters will acknowledge things that happened in the past, but they're few and far between. The only ones I can really think of, if you're not considering, the fact that we watch Harvey Dent become Two-Face, and then he is Two-Face from then on. And occasionally there will be talk about giving him some sort of plastic surgery, reconstructive surgery or something. I can think of, there's the episode with the toy maker when he creates the Batman robot clone or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then a few episodes later, we see him again, and he's like, oh, I don't do that anymore. I just garden now. This is my happy place, so it's like little moments like that show that there is evolution over the course of Batman the Animated Series. But in this series, we have done 3 continuous episodes, which actually, look, I know it's obvious, but that's where Previously on X-Men comes from. It's the fact that every episode is going to have a recap because this is an ongoing story, not unlike a comic book.
Yeah.
They did a good job of making everything matter. And,
for sure. Nothing has felt superfluous or unnecessary or filler. It all is a part of this bigger story. Batman is typically about one person. That story is typically about Bruce Wayne.
By his choice.
Yes. And of course, the people he encounters, the anti-heroes, the villains, they teach him more about his morality. Whereas X-Men is not about a single person. It's about this community of people, and we're introduced to them amidst this ongoing war. And it's
a war that most of them don't even necessarily want know that they're in.
It's the relentless persecution of their kind.
Mm-hmm.
And here, if it wasn't deepened in the last couple of episodes, a new character is introduced that creates more nuances and complications. All 3 of these episodes, actually there's a 4th because there's a next installation about Magneto coming up. But these first handful of episodes, because it's said to be continued.
Oh, that's true.
Right.
Well, don't they all, all at this point going to say to be continued?
They're all going to say that. It ends on a cliffhanger.
Right.
And it just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
The action does not stop. The story does not stop. And it's really gripping. And it's really amazing to understand that when we were children, we were watching this and picking up different pieces of this story and integrating it into our psychology. And now as adults, you can go back and watch these, and they still have elements of relatability, and they have elements of heart that we can relate to.
Yeah.
So far,
I appreciate
I'm really
the
enjoying
nuance
that
too. There are moments, like you said, that as a child you wouldn't necessarily pick up on subtleties with characters, and in some cases, sort of contradictions or hypocrisy.
I love that.
In some way. And I mean, there's a moment that I'm sure we're going to bring up between Wolverine and Xavier, and it's so subtle,
but it's so real.
Yeah.
But that's real life.
Yeah.
We are in the same community. We might have similar values. We might have the same goal, the same ultimate, outcome that we're looking for, but we aren't seeing eye to eye. You're cherry picking your allies.
Yeah.
You're using some of the same. Now we're going to really get into it, but I guess it becomes a question: is Professor X using some of the same discriminatory, biased practices that his enemies are using? Why isn't he more forgiving? Why isn't he more understanding of other people in the same way that that he should be?
Say more about that. Let's go ahead and talk about it then.
Well, I mean, I think we'll get into it when the story unfolds. But it sounds like when we're actually introduced to two characters, Sabretooth and Magneto, and
two characters who, by the way, we have sort of been introduced to via news footage in the first couple of episodes. We saw Sabretooth picking up a car or something and throwing it across the street, just wreaking havoc. We've seen Magneto on the news. This is the first time that we're really getting to know them.
I mean, think of them as a radical group of mutants.
A brotherhood, even.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say we can't really call them X-Men because that's Professor X's team, but
trademarked, patented.
But they're mutants, like the X-Men are.
Yeah.
And they use tactics and political practices and more violent methods for their movement, to get their ideals across. And
they're the types of people that they are mutants led by Magneto, who believes that mutants are superior. In fact, they're referred to as Homo superior. And it's this belief that if you just eradicate anyone who is not a mutant, the world will be harmonious because we will all understand one another. We will all have different powers, but we're all part of the same breed. And it is this understanding that we are people while other people are ants, and we will conquer them. We will hit them with raid. We'll do whatever it takes to live our lives the way that we've always known or wanted.
I think we do need to start with the beginning of the episode, which focuses on Beast's trial, because I think you'll see the two perspectives, and there are more perspectives. Like we're saying, there's tremendous nuance in the storytelling here, but the main two perspectives, where Beast, who's been imprisoned and essentially accused of breaking into the registration offices, the government-owned registration offices, and he's also accused, I think, of damaging the Sentinels and a number of other crimes. He is patiently awaiting his trial. He's in his shackles, alone in his little cell, reading Animal Farm by Orwell. And he actually believes that he will receive due process.
Yeah. And that the trial will reveal his innocence.
He has faith in the system. I
Let
so
me tell you.
I know. I mean, already there's this sense, and I love this character so much. So there's this almost kind of this hopefulness around this idea. Well, he's right. He didn't commit some of the crimes he's being accused of. He revealed that the folks who were being monitored were also being incarcerated, were also being persecuted. So he actually
illegally as well.
Yeah,
he was uncovering an illegal act by the government, by the Mutant Control Agency.
Right. So he thought, I actually did something quite good, and the jury will notice this. I will receive a fair trial. And so he's patiently waiting. He's a pacifist. He doesn't see any point in trying to argue with the guards or get into fights or break out. And it's,
by the way, can we talk about those guards for a second?
Yeah.
So the MCA is located in DC, which is just above Northern Virginia. So maybe
I know what you're about to say.
It justifies the fact that both of them have such deep Southern accents.
It is not a coincidence to me that they have deep Southern accents and are portraying kind of stereotypical
bumpkins
stupidness. One of the examples is they think there are pictures in the novella Animal Farm,
correct,
which is this allegorical story that includes anthropomorphized animals who want freedom. They want equality. It's a story that really makes sense that Beast is reading it, right?
How many times do you think he's read that book, or do you think he's reading it for the first time?
No, I think he's read that book many times, and he's just trying to.
I do too, but he also said he also says in the courtroom later, it gives me time to catch up on my Dostoevsky, which implies that maybe he's not read all the Dostoevsky. So maybe he's not read all the classics the way that we think. Maybe he generally sticks to scientific books and journals, and maybe Xavier was like, Beast, you really need to read this one. That you're going to get something out of this. But I imagine it's a favorite.
He's the intellectual, and I feel like he's one of us.
I know a lot of intellectuals who abhor reading fiction because it's beneath them. Even if it's allegorical and metaphorical and all the other oracles, it's somehow it robs them of their intellect and their time.
I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about being an intellectual and liking fiction, and in particular liking fantasy or science fiction or allegorical stories. My understanding of Beast is that he is one of us in the sense that he loves burying his face in a book. He's a scientist, and he has super intellect and is probably making all of these amazing scientific discoveries in the lab, but his mind is wandering into these fantastical places, and that for him is also intellectual. The wonder of the brain. And escapism. Absolutely. He sees the value of escapism, especially because a part of escapism is projecting yourself into a world that isn't your own. And that world may show you, or that universe may show you or mirror the hardships that you're in, and really put the names to it, or put your liberation. And I think a lot of the books that he's talking about, and later he quotes Shakespeare, and he's talking about, he's making all these other literary references. This truly is about his wishes for liberation. And he finds it in not only real history, but he finds it in fictional literature.
Right.
So I agree with you about these guards. They are, in contrast to Beast, they are, less than intelligent. Their pants fall down later when Magneto comes and tries to rescue Beast. It's very silly. It's kind of like a little slapsticky, but I think it's made to humiliate the guards and show them as they're not deep thinkers. They're followers.
Yeah.
They're just kind of following the orders.
Yeah. Beast is given an opportunity to escape right after this. Magneto introduces himself, and his position is, you're one of us, regardless of who you currently work for. You've been abandoned by Xavier, who's left you here to suffer this, mockery of a trial. And so I have come to be your savior, and together we can help rule the galaxy. And Beast turns him down, says straight up, this is all by design. By doing this and going through this, we're going to show the world that there are injustices being done to people of my kind.
Yeah.
And this outrages Magneto. He leaves.
And I think, kind of to your point, that's the other way, again, a very powerful and illuminating way on a kid's show to explain the difference between these two factions and these two sets of ideals or beliefs about liberation. Mm-hmm. One pathway is through facts, through litigation, through using the system that exists to prove the inequality that's part of our everyday lives. It's not wrong.
Right.
And I'd say Magneto's perspective comes from a very specific lived experience that he is.
Well, let's talk about that.
He's not making this up.
Yeah, let's talk about the lived experience.
Yeah, he's not choosing violence because he prefers to. Mm-hmm. This is what he knows.
Talk about that.
He's tried the other ways.
We know a little bit of his backstory through this episode, because we've learned that Xavier and Magnus, now known as Magneto, mm-hmm. are contemporaries. They both set out with the design of helping people. And we're not talking about mutants. We're talking about people. They were both hiding their abilities from not just each other, but everyone around them. And there was a war-torn country, unnamed, and invaders to that country were militarized and destroying the country and the people, the inhabitants. And Magnus eventually had enough and decided that he was going to seek justice from those that took his family and wrecked his country. And he became Magneto and has now been waging war on mankind ever since. So there is a trauma-informed background there with Magnus.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier has certainly seen his share of trauma as well, but it's almost like he didn't take it as personally. It's not his country. He was there helping, but...
And it was so interesting in this version of the origin story, because I think there are a few in the comics, or at least one main one in the comics that's different. But in this origin story, they are partners, and they're...
they always have been...
Right. Rather, they're helping patients. They partner up to help hospital patients,
right,
in their various serious situations, and then it's revealed when the risk comes to a peak, it's revealed to each other that they both actually are mutants and have these superpowers. Mm-hmm. And that's an alliance that initially, I think for a moment, strengthens their friendship, but because they're using it for different things, they have this huge falling out.
Right. And I should say that this issue or this episode mirrors to some degree X-Men #1, in that in X-Men #1, he does take over a military base. The X-Men do. I mean, it's a different team of X-Men in that issue, but there are maybe not nuclear. There are missiles involved, similar to the way they are here. They are doing their best to sort of contemporize, but also mirror in some way his origin in the comics.
Mm-hmm. And his name really is Magnus?
Magnus.
So that they didn't change that his original name is Magnus.
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was
later it becomes like
Eric.
Eric. Well, was Eric Magnus, Eric Lenshear. There are different names that he has been known throughout, but he's always Magnus is his name.
Yeah. It's interesting because we know this character, especially when played on screen, as a Holocaust survivor, and there's more contextualization of the war. And here it still ties him to a history of being a war victim and trying to do good, trying to help patients and family members in the community, and being attacked, and those very people that he's close to being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't go into detail, and I don't know that it needs to go into detail as far as like who are these soldiers and what was the conflict. All we know is that it was his home country, and he was essentially driven out.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes a refugee, and he holds these beliefs that these are systems of power that will fail you.
Yeah.
These are systems of power that were not built for us. These rights and rules, they were not built for us in mind. And his argument, or his comments to Beast, were of warning. You're going to believe in a system that eventually will fail you.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you're going to believe in a system that was built to marginalize you.
Yeah.
It's a warning, and I think it's a fair warning. And as it turns out, he wasn't wrong. What happens in the courtroom is, absolutely upsetting and disappointing for Beast. It's not the outcome that he expected. The fact that there is a mutant on trial for these crimes against the government is not unremarkable. There are people in the streets and outside the courtroom rallying and protesting. The show actually shows signs of these protesters. They're holding signs that say things like, I think, like, mutants do not belong here. Go back to where you came from.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me wonder, well, where are they supposed to go back to?
Right.
What does that mean? Like, I think a sign like that is one that we can fully understand what that means. You don't belong here,
right.
is really the sentiment. But
right.
And we've seen these signs. We see these signs right now. But I'm trying to understand from the perspective of a non-mutant, where do you think these folks are supposed to be? Where do you think they're supposed to go? So that kind of raised a question for me. The trial itself, what happens in the courtroom, is also really kind of disturbing, because the judge even makes a statement, hey, let's leave these extreme perspectives out of this. Let's have a fair trial. But he himself seems to be biased. I wonder if you can play that clip where the judge is revealing his lack of trust of Beast. Clearly some bias that he holds against mutants, not believing that someone like Beast could actually be innocent.
Yep, sure. Got it right here. Let's take a listen.
Your Honor, because of the severity of this defendant's crime and his demonstrated danger to the community, the people move to deny bail.
Your Honor, my client is charged with a simple felony. You're denying him bail just because he's a mutant.
Now, Mr. Hodge, you know this court harbors no prejudice. Any insinuation to the contrary will not be tolerated.
Your Honor?
Yes, Mr. McCoy.
May I address the court on the subject of mitigating circumstances?
Certainly, Mr. McCoy. I wouldn't want anyone to think we weren't being fair.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, we mutants yearn only to live in peace with our human brothers. To paraphrase the bard, I am a mutant. Hath not a mutant senses, affections, fed with the same food, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a human is? If you prick us, do we not bleed?
Don't tempt these people, Mr. McCoy. Please get to the point.
Certainly. 2 days before the incident in the mutant registration office. 11 mutants disappeared, taken.
Your Honor, what possible relevance could this have to Mr. McCoy's criminal activities?
All were recent registrants with the Mutant Control Agency.
Your Honor, the defendant is attempting to justify his crime by attacking a program set up to help mutants.
What about the mutant attacker in the detention center last night? My brother was one of those guards.
Bailiffs, remove that man.
A lot of good men were hurt. Is that your idea of helping mankind?
Quiet! Quiet, I say! Now, in view of the violence of both the original offense and last night's attempted escape, the court feels this defendant would pose a danger to the community if released.
But, Your Honor!
Bail denied.
After that, should we talk about the fact that the judge is not calling him Beast, which would be very easy to do? He's Mr. McCoy.
He's Dr. McCoy.
Well, he calls him Mr. McCoy.
Well,
but
he should have called him Dr.
He's Hank McCoy. He seems to be giving him, or is that in some way, shape, or form dead naming? I mean, I don't think Beast minds being called Hank, but I mean, that's
his legal name. I suppose this is appropriate. It may be true that this is a judge who's making efforts to be fair,
or is forcing him to use a name that he may not be.
That's a really good point.
Using anymore.
That's a really good point too.
But of course, I don't think anyone was like, "Hey, what's your name?" And when they were fingerprinting him, he was like, "Beast. I'm the Beast." I'm probably not.
No, I don't see that, but I can understand what you're saying from the perspective of the judge. It doesn't go well. There's an assumption that he's basically guilty before he's even put in front of a jury. And I think that it doesn't help. There are people in the courtroom who are accusing him, blaming him, starting essentially a riot. Mm-hmm. And that's where Sabretooth comes in, and there's a total blowout. There's this fight that breaks out.
Yeah.
And, you can't help but associate now these riots and fights with mutants. And so, again, when we think about the stereotypes and assumptions made about them, Sabretooth isn't helping.
Right. So now we're officially introduced to Sabretooth. He never really says much. He says about as much here as he did in that news footage in episode 1. But again, he is more the Beast-like villain that people want to perceive Beast to be. And this character is instantly recognized by Logan, by Wolverine. Clearly they have a history, and it's not a great one. I don't get the sense that they were partners or contemporaries similar to Magneto and Xavier. But whatever it is, there's trauma there as well.
They don't go into it either, but in the courtroom, when this riot breaks out, Wolverine specifically says, don't help him.
Yeah, because Scott wants to help. He's like, they're going to kill him. And he's like, good.
Yeah, it's pretty raw. It's intense. Ultimately, the X-Men do rescue Sabretooth. They take him back to their facility, and they're helping heal him back to health. And Wolverine's really pissed off about this. He doesn't say why, but he makes it clear that this is one of his enemies. This is not somebody who he wants to save.
Going so far as to when they do bring him back to the manor and they try to give him medical attention while he is unconscious in a coma, Wolverine's doing everything he can to simply get him out of the house. I mean, there's
one scene that is pretty amazing here where it's fairly there's that tension between Professor X and Wolverine. They're in the room where Sabretooth is being treated. He's in a hospital bed, and suddenly these guitars go up, these electric guitars rile up, and Wolverine pushes the bed, the hospital bed, against the wall, and then rushes past Professor X, and he's just basically like, yeah, so I think the direct quote is,
I have the quote. You want to
Oh,
take
yes.
a listen?
Yeah,
All right.
that.
So
Go
this
for
is all right. So here we go.
How come we're supposed to trash your old enemy? But we gotta go easy on mine.
Would you say that Charles is being hypocritical here? Is there a reason for Charles to justify sending his team out to defend the manor and the military base and the world from Magneto, while also allowing the team to monitor and service Sabretooth at the same time? Does Sabretooth have the same chance for redemption that Logan has apparently demonstrated in the past? Because Storm comes in and says, at one point, many of us felt the same way about you being allowed to stay here.
Yeah.
And since then, you have become a productive member of the team.
Yeah, it was kind of rude because he was basically saying, like, look, this person is out of control. They
Interesting. It's interesting that you say it's rude, because I see two sides of the argument and I agree with both of them.
Well, I guess rude in that, like,
they gave him a chance. They gave like Wolverine was about as primitive as one gets, and they gave him the chance. And since then, while he's still certainly sharp around the edges, he has become a valuable member of the team.
Well, I think they're saying, yes, you're right. They're saying Sabretooth is no different than how you were when you joined us.
Yes.
Give him a chance. And I think what Logan is trying to explain is that his personal history with Sabretooth is enough. Do you not trust me enough to know that, yeah, based on your one day of knowing this guy, that doesn't compare. That's not the same as me telling you literally that this person isn't safe, that they're not one of us. And I guess the rudeness that I was referring to was that he was kind of saying the reasons why this person shouldn't be in the manor. And they're like, well, that's just like you. And it's just like, no, that's my enemy. How it feels kind of superficial. It sort of feels like they're making this blanket statement about, like, well, you're the same. Aren't you the same? And he does not feel that way. He feels that they're wildly different.
Well, and it's because he is educated with history. Like he knows what their background is, and he knows that it's not as simple as reforming this guy. It's going to be.
I think it comes down to trust. I think it comes down to Professor X making all the decisions and Logan trying to contribute to that decision making and saying, you need to trust me on this. I'm making the call. And time again, and this is why he's often very upset with the rest of the team, is that they don't trust him. And
but
here's another example of that.
They don't, but he also is constantly this is where I would say that Logan reminds me of Batman when it comes to the Justice League. He's not really a member. He just kind of lives in the Watchtower occasionally and helps them out when they need him. But he decides when they need him, and he decides what they need from him. And I feel like Logan's the same way. Logan lives there. He eats there. He helps out his buddies when necessary. But is he a genuine member of the team?
How can one feel like a member when they're not treated like a member? So it kind of goes both ways. I'm saying it's bidirectional. I'm saying, yes, there are some aspects, characteristics, and personality traits that Wolverine carries.
That's just that's the snake eating its own tail, though, because
that is what that means.
Because I know, that's why I said it. Because he is not treated like a member because he doesn't act like a member. So I would argue they keep trying to explain to him what being a member is.
Mm-hmm.
And he just goes against it every
Absolutely. Time. Because it's not being a member on his terms. So it's a little.
So that's not a member.
No, it's not.
That's not being a member. You're not a team player.
I think Wolverine is also the type of member who's just like, I don't want to be a member. If this is all what you're about, I don't know that I want to be a full lifetime platinum member of whatever this is.
Right.
I want to look, we generally believe in the same things and we want the same outcome. And look, you protect me and I protect you. And look, I am safer here than I am out in the world day to day.
Well, more importantly, the world is safer with me here than it is with me out in the world day by day. So yeah. He sees himself as a specialist. I think he sees himself as a specialist. He's someone who knows how to do what he does best. Or I should say in Chris Claremont terms.
Oh no.
He's the best at what he does, and what he does is not very nice. But again, I don't think the other teammates don't view him as, or don't treat him like a teammate. I think they keep trying to drill in him what it means to be a teammate. And he is so against that.
I think fundamentally he's against that for a number of reasons, right? Having to do with his own repertoire, the loneliness that we talked about last time in the last episode of being as old as he is and having sustained the hardships and losses that he's experienced. But also, I think the frustration that he never quite is accepted as who he is. And so the messaging is, yes, you can be a part of this team, but you have to adjust yourself to be like us. And I think a part of him adjusts ever so slightly, but not to the point where he feels like he's erasing himself. Of course, there is this exterior kind of this outer shell, this defensiveness he has about him, that it takes a while to get to know him, and you feel like, yes, you need to earn his trust and he needs to earn your trust. But to say that you need to change yourself to be accepted feels hypocritical.
And could I ask, because what you just said made me think about it, might his mutant healing factor play a part in this? He is already, at the time that this show aired, 92 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He has been alive longer than any of them, including Xavier. He has seen things they have not seen. He has experienced things they have not experienced. And realistically, he will be around long after they're all gone. So why do I have to conform to you?
Yeah. Right.
You're asking me not only to change who I have been for 92 years, but who I will be when you're gone. And will that be a better person? We don't know. And he doesn't necessarily trust that. He doesn't want to be pacified because he knows the past behind him and he probably knows the future ahead of him, and it's not going to be easy. So I think he's probably the way he is as more of a survival mode.
Yeah.
And not literally to survive because of his healing factor, he will anyway, but it's how he is going to cope with the trauma of the future by being equally bullish.
For Professor X to ask everyone, not everyone knows Magneto, but for him to say, trust me, we all need to attack this guy.
Yeah.
And he's probably right. I think I feel that sense of hypocrisy too. Like, well, you're making this decision for all of us, but you're not listening to my perspective, to my decision that we should not harbor this enemy, Sabretooth. And yet you're healing him. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is this sense of hypocrisy, and how are we actually on the same team here when I'm trying to make decisions and trying to gain your trust, but you simply it won't align with me.
Right. And part of it too, while yes, apocryphal, could also be similar. Well, it is similar to Wolverine in that Xavier has history and knows what Magnus wants and the extent to which Magnus will go to get it. The difference, I think, between Magneto and Sabretooth in this case is that Magneto is infinitely wiser and more dangerous as a result. Sabretooth is pure instinct and animal rage. He's going to destroy the car that's in front of him, but Magneto's thinking bigger picture, and it very well may
destroy the city.
Correct. And it may be very and ultimately the world. It's one of those cases where Magneto is Xavier is seeing the bigger, longer picture that, yeah, we could subdue Sabretooth, but the bigger villain, the one that's more dangerous, is the one who's outside right now. And so at this point, I think Xavier is just prioritizing.
So the X-Men do confront Magneto, who is at this point ready to either align with the X-Men or just, completely oppose them. You have to believe in the things he believes in. There's no halfway. There's no, well, what if we compromise? His ideology is pretty hard and fixed, and he's dead set on the destruction of humans. So, yes, Professor X is absolutely correct to see this as yet another enemy.
Yeah.
Not one of our kind. He's completely past that threshold of our shared understanding. So they're confronting Magneto in this nuclear facility. There are warheads here, and he's already set the timer for them to go off.
Yeah.
Here is where he actually is given the opportunity to go about this more peacefully. The X-Men essentially tell him, we'll include you. We'll bring you in. Please just do not choose this violence.
Yeah.
But this is the point where it's clear they're going to be enemies from this moment on.
Yeah.
Magneto forecasts for them, if you choose a pacifist way, this will be your nightmare.
Right. I've got audio of this.
Yeah.
So let's take a listen to it now.
This is your last warning.
I had hoped Xavier would have realized that his childish quest for peaceful coexistence with humans is hopeless.
I suppose that a civil war is your answer.
Better that we die on our feet than live on our knees.
I cannot move!
Tell Xavier I am stronger now. As I healed from our last encounter, I had time to prepare. Tell him those who oppose me are traitors to mutant kind. I will show him no mercy. If Charles Xavier dreams of peace between human and mutant, his vision will soon become a nightmare.
And again, it's the idea that, would you want to live in a world where you will be perpetually persecuted, always seen as less than human in a marginalized, oppressive category for your lifetime?
Yeah.
Why choose that existence? This is your choice now to find liberation. He's really laying it out there. The way that he goes about this, though, is so destructive that, of course, none of the X-Men agree with this. Even our most hostile X-Men find this to be, just incredibly extreme.
Right.
So their whole purpose now is, let's intervene the warheads, let's disarm them. And it's both Wolverine and Storm who manage to to do that successfully.
Storm mostly, where she sends the 3 warheads out into the ocean with using her powers, and Cerebro back at the manor gives her all the information she needs by way of Xavier.
Well, it's really interesting because she chooses first to sacrifice herself. I think she's going to use her own energy to combine with the warheads and she'll perish. And it's Professor X through Cerebro that tells her, I'm laughing because he sort of says in a way, don't do this. You don't have to do this. But he's telling her that because like, well, there's another way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but that's also good of him because he's letting her know your sacrifice isn't necessary right now. There are
not
other ways
because they care about you, but actually there's another way to do this, and it's this. And
by the way, the easy way too would simply be let them go into the water. Because their explosions aren't going to.
I don't know where they were headed. At some point, they were headed right back at the
right back at them. Yeah.
And so she has to redirect them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because Scott's like, well, it's better if we let them explode here than over a city. And then the missile starts coming back at them. And you're like, oh, maybe that was the plan all along.
Yeah. It's like, oh, Cyclops is a little ineffective in this episode.
Oh, I thought you were just going to end the sentence there.
No, just in this episode.
Oh, okay.
Other partners, other participants are a little bit more foregrounded. And
but you know who would have been crazy useful at a time like this would have been like Rogue.
In what way?
Not only does she have the ability to fly, but she's got the super strength, and like she could have helped Storm at the very least with doing certain things, but she's not in the episode. Neither is Gambit. They're both missing.
Who do you think would be good to handle Magneto from a moral capacity?
From a moral capacity?
Not from force or from the physical aspects of this combat. So, yeah, like who do you think can reason with Magneto? Who do you think is best at that?
Jean.
Oh, really?
Well, Jean has always been set up, and I realize that I shouldn't necessarily be talking about this in context with the animated series, but Jean has always been set up as potentially the most powerful mutant in the world. Mm-hmm. That her psychic abilities are actually better and deeper than Charles. She's just not necessarily always been as honed in her abilities, but
so she could actually penetrate his mind. And
I mean, it depends on what if we're saying that the helmet is his protection against having his mind penetrated by Charles, then probably not. But I will say that she has always been presented as sort of the superior version of Charles, that when he's gone, she'll be able to take over the mantle of being able to reason with people, and her abilities are certainly formidable to someone like Magneto. And then later we'll see probably how she could be weaponized and turned into a very fearful mutant. But yeah, I would say probably the best person to reason with Magneto would probably be someone like Jean. We've already seen Beast tried to reason with him in the cell.
I don't think Beast is your guy.
And it just angered him further. I mean, because you think of reasoning, Beast is that guy. Like he's the one who would be able to sit you down and talk to you and make you understand. If anyone could make that judge understand, it would be Beast. But unfortunately, they thought he tried to break out the night before. And he didn't.
That was and that was the other crime that he was accused of, is trying to break out of his cell, and he did not expect that. He had nothing to do with that. I do think too, Scott could potentially reason with Magneto.
I don't see it.
Really?
No, because Scott, while a good leader, I don't see Magnus as being swayed by Scott.
Well, Scott is fundamentally about, when we think about where his strengths are, he's good at moral reasoning. So his efforts would probably be centered on, this is going to sound weird, but humanizing the humans.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what Magnus wants or needs.
That's why I'm agreeing with you to some degree in that that would be the angle Scott would probably use.
But I also see Scott as being, and I think this is just piggybacking on what you said, Scott's a diplomat. Scott needs everyone to love him on both sides, and he needs everybody to just get along. And you've got a character in Magnus that's so far beyond that. He not only, again, to use the sort of ant analogy, he does not see the point in reasoning with creatures that can't reason back at the same level. And so I just don't see Scott as being the diplomat that could bring, if Xavier couldn't do it, then I don't think Scott could. But this is a fun one. Who else could who else would be really bad at this? Gambit would be really bad at this. Rogue, not great.
Yeah, probably not.
Jubilee. Now, Jubilee's interesting.
Jubilee is so Jubilee is essentially not allowed to be a part of this encounter, and I'm glad, because she seems like she's vulnerable because she's still exploring her mutant identity, and this is someone very experienced, very powerful, has historical examples that not false, real historical examples that he can share with her to persuade her to join him. So I think there's some risk there with having her be a part of this conflict.
Yeah. Good episode.
And she's they may have a similar characteristics or past, because she is also someone who, I wouldn't necessarily call her a refugee, but she was someone who was relocated or moved from her home country, and may also experience some of the oppressions that he did.
That's the thing is I think that Magnus is as formidable a debate opponent as one could possibly expect. You know, he is someone who can genuinely, I mean, Stan Lee even said when he created Magneto that he didn't see him as a bad guy.
Yeah.
He's just a guy who went through different ways to different avenues to get to peace.
Well, I mean, I like this show so much because the storytelling, the writing evidences the development of his character. He is not a straight up villain.
Yeah.
He has his own personal reasoning for the decisions that he's making, and ultimately his plan that he shares with the X-Men is basically, do you want a life full of hardships? Do you basically want your entire life to be characterized by trauma and hardship? Or do you want one big battle, one time, incredibly destructive, but change making? Right. But it will completely transform your experience of life.
He's almost the in some ways he's almost the other side of the coin to a character like Superman, who grew up not being allowed to excel too much, certainly not in sports. So like, don't give away these abilities that you have. And Magneto is saying, why should I have to suppress myself so that you can feel comfortable, or so that you can feel superior to me? Why do you get to give me rules with how I use my abilities? I have evolved beyond you. And whereas a character like Superman became a good guy because of the sort of
the compromise.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Magneto is now being told, stop trying to put your thumb on me. I will be me.
Yeah, I'm embracing who I am.
Yeah.
I'm not erasing myself because I really liked how you said that, because you feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm completely living authentically, fully actualized.
And by the way, this is an allegory for all kinds of people today. I mean, it pick a marginalized group and it's all the same. It's the exact same. Why do I need to conform? Because it makes you uncomfortable that I'm living my life the way that I'm living it. And I think that's a really important message. But don't go launching nuclear warheads.
Yeah. So that's the extreme version of this ideology.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's clear that we continue to be aligned with our main X-Men characters, that they continue. We see their day-to-day struggles. For some reason, this is even reminding me of episodes of Picard that we've done, where it's like, yeah, the choices you make because of your moral reasoning, because you are fundamentally a good person, means a little bit more hardship for you, a little bit more of a daily struggle. You don't pick the perfect life.
Mm-hmm.
You don't pick the solution where you get to excel and you get to be, in the happiest life that you can be in, because you know that you care about the existence and fundamentally the happiness of other people.
Yeah.
And in this case, I do think that the X-Men generally want humans or non-mutants to be unharmed. They want them to be to find happiness, equanimity, equality, just like what they want. So it's sort of the argument that we just want what you have.
Right.
We don't want more than that. But of course, Magneto fundamentally believes a completely different set of ideologies than that.
Right. Again, good episode.
And this episode ends at a cliffhanger because he's still out there. He still poses a danger.
Mm-hmm.
And Beast is still in prison.
Yeah, he's still in prison.
So this is very unresolved.
How do you feel about that? I mean,
happy with that.
While it does continue the story in a realistic manner, you're basically hobbling an important member of your team.
So yes, I'm upset about that because he did infiltrate the MCA with the other team members, but he was kind of at the wrong place at the wrong time, got captured, accused of all these different crimes that he didn't commit. He becomes the example. He becomes the mutant that I fear a jury of humans and a judge who is human or a non-mutant would, want to set an example from this.
I also feel like it works perfectly in world, but also in the real world, to choose your character that doesn't look like everyone else, to choose a big furry blue creature is very much how the real world exists as well. It's like we're going to choose the person that doesn't look like me, and we're going to put them on trial. More often, it doesn't work if it's Scott.
Right.
The Scott could give the same speeches, less poetic. But he could give the same speeches, and like you mentioned in the last episode, he'll look real dapper doing it. But
I think Scott has a good chance of earning the trust of other people. Now he has, of course, he has to keep his glasses on, but he has a great chance of winning over human non-mutants. So I think Beast is sort of set in a position to
fail.
he's set in a position to fail. I think he's meant to horrorize. I don't think that's a word, but he's meant to horrorize, monsterize mutants. He's meant to sort of be positioned or seen as dangerous and violent. Look at those sharp teeth, look at those fangs, look at those claws. This must be a dangerous person. And yet, of anyone, he's the calmest, nicest, most humane person of the group.
Yeah.
I hope he gets out soon. I worry.
You'd like to see him become a real member of the team at this point?
Well, I think like anyone, any mutant who's imprisoned for these reasons, I would worry about. He also has if anything, he has emotional intelligence. So this is something that's interesting about Beast. Yes, he has book smarts. He's a scientist. He has that book smart intelligence that we think of when we think of this character, but he also has emotional intelligence. He's not the member of the team who's going to suffer greatly in prison. He will find ways to stay resilient. He's reading books. He's
keeping his mind.
He's keeping his mind sharp. He's looking at stories that take him out of these four walls in his prison. He's
it's a philosophy.
Meditating. Absolutely. Yeah. So this is a long game. This is the long haul for him. So he's just incredibly sharp, using discernment, not panicking, not arguing. He knows he's innocent, and he's just staying fixed and determined to fight this fight from, not with claws, not with teeth, but fight this fight through litigation, through law, through books.
A justice system that's broken.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it's tough to see that, but he's the kind of person that's going to survive this captivity.
Yeah. Another person that would survive the captivity would probably be Wolverine, but for very different reasons.
Gosh.
He would establish dominance early and he wouldn't like it, but if you got him in a position where he just couldn't escape, I think Wolverine would do okay in prison.
Well, he's been there before.
I don't know of anyone else that would necessarily Scott's done for. Scott would not do well.
I think he would do well there. Well,
yeah, we've got turkey and stuffing and your pie to that I'm smelling right there on the oven right now. Like it's in a moment, our listeners are going to start hearing my stomach growling. So we've got to call it quits on this episode. But until next time, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreyapsychology.com, or on social media at Dr. Drea Psychology.
You can find me. I am mostly over at Instagram at B_Ward028. And you can also find us on Twitter at Arkham Sessions, at Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. You can email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook. Come to our Discord and have a great conversation with us, and come join our Patreon, patreon.com/Arkham Sessions, for exclusive posts and more. And we want to thank Bryant and Barbara Dillon over at Fanbase Press for always being our family and the hosts of our podcast. And then we want to thank all of you. Andrea, I have to tell you, I don't want to get overly sentimental here, but we're talking about giving thanks, and I have to thank you because this show has been an important part of my life, our lives, but certainly mine, over these last few years, and I've got to meet so many people as a result of this podcast, and I just think that you have sort of fulfilled me in ways that I never could have imagined. And I'm thankful for you in my life because of everything you've brought me. So on a very important day like this, I want to thank you for being here.
Well, that means a lot to me. And I have gotten or grown so attached to the show. We've done it for so many years that I almost cannot imagine not doing the show. It's such a, it's such an important and meaningful part of our relationship. So thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Have a very happy and safe holiday season. And we will see you next time for Deadly Reunions. I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Mission accomplished, buddy.
Okay. Let's go home.